Do you realize we are in Africa? But what would the government look like if Julius took over? What would it look like if Zuma took over? It's no different. They got 40, Mike. 40% the ANC, yet they govern 60% of the country's management. How did that work out?
Yeah, it's madness.
It's a nationalistic,
Yeah,
socialistic,
yeah,
communistic,
yeah.
orientated governance.
Yeah, which is exactly what we've lived through for the last 30 years. So what I'm saying is...
Nay.
Yeah,
90 years.
yeah, yeah.
As if the bloody National Party
Yeah.
wasn't nationalistic,
Yeah.
socialistic,
Yeah.
and undemocratic.
So as Africans, and especially South Africans, we see that it's really important to understand where South Africa actually stands within the evolution of the BRICS bloc, so to speak, because as now new members are actually being included in the BRICS bloc, it's almost becoming sort of like becoming a major rival bloc to the major Western power bloc, as it were. And so it's really important to understand, especially in light with Neo de Beer's speech here in this interview, where he argues that the ANC is actually, he sees the ANC as a communist, socialist, left-sided, left-winged, party that is now really with center-right parties in trying to form a government of national unity, but yet having South Africa being represented in the bloc, the future of the GNU, the future of South Africans, how South Africans will see themselves in a future, possibly a future BRICS bloc, where South Africa plays a dominant, part in that bloc, would actually need to be understood clearly. And so I think it's really important to understand this speech. This is a really intellectual speech between Neo de Beer and Mike from State of the Nation, really discussing sort of like, so to speak, the future of South Africa in the emerging BRICS bloc and the wider global order. Let's listen to this really powerful speech from Neo de Beer, and I'll be back for some really interesting analysis on where South Africa is at the moment with BRICS and where BRICS is now that President Putin is actually hosting the BRICS summit, which is a 3-day summit in Kazan in Russia.
Yeah, now, I wanted to go back and interrogate one of the things you said when you say that they had to do it and that it's the alternative. Let's interrogate the alternative, because I'm not 100% sure it's as terrifying as it sounds.
It's a nationalistic,
Yeah,
socialistic,
yeah,
communistic,
yeah.
orientated governance.
Yeah, which is exactly what we've lived through for the last 30 years. So what I'm saying is...
Nay.
Yeah,
90 years.
yeah, yeah.
As if the bloody National Party
Yeah.
wasn't nationalistic,
Yeah.
socialistic,
Yeah.
and undemocratic.
So what I'm saying is that this whole idea of the doomsday coalition,
Yeah, we've had it.
we've had it. So the coalition comes in. Let's just say this thing falls apart tomorrow, right? What happens to South Africa?
Sure.
Do you know what I mean? What happens? Listen, the IMF will be here in about 6.5 seconds to say, excuse me, just behave a little bit differently.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of like clawing with this idea of saying we're saving South Africa, where I don't see this as a saving of South Africa. Do you understand what I mean? I'm saying I don't see what they've saved us from, because what could Deputy President Malema have done? What could he have done?
You said a word now 4 times in 2 minutes, which people don't get. You said Africa. Africa. Yeah? Do you realize we are in Africa? We've got this, I think, very, very demakar kind of ideology confused. We're not Europe,
No.
Mike. We're Africa. We have a standard set and aptitude of a Western civilization that was enforced at one stage to bring a Western culture, a Western ideology, a Western modernization attitude to an African continent. And argue like you want to, we were much more progressive in modernization than Mozambique or Zim or Angola. It's just because we had that modernization aptitude of the then Western philosophy. But Africa was going like Africa goes. The African National Congress's ideology was that the people must govern, but we still had the Communistic Party as a tripartite partner. We still have COSATU as a labor movement. And may I say that globally the SACP and trade unions have become irrelevant. They are no longer a modern partner that you should have, because they actually stifle the economy. Yet the ANC does not drop them. They're still in cahoots. But what would the government look like if Julius took over? What would it look like if Zuma took over? It's no different.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
We lived under Zuma.
Sure.
We know what it would
We
look
lived
like.
under the ANC regime 30 years.
Yeah.
They governed as close to as what they could on a national front. They wanted to also do certain moves.
Yeah.
Nationalisation of Reserve Bank, land a stig a SOE per day.
Yeah.
You and I need to look back and go, I must tell you I don't agree with that. But then I'm a vehement capitalist. I'm a Democrat in that sense. But I also told you I'm a conservative in value. So what do I see? I didn't see a major change. We would have just had what we had previously, but just another guy on a poster.
Exactly. You know, so what I'm saying is I don't see the point of being in a coalition where you compromise everything. You say nothing. You say nothing about a compromised justice minister. You say nothing about the Bella Bill. You say nothing about being shafted in the provinces, etc. To save South Africa from what? I don't see the alternative as having been a whole lot worse than this.
Well, the question is, what is your appetite? You will always speak about we can fix this, but there must be political will. That's a strange sentence. Political will.
Yeah.
You took a job, you put your face on a poster, you get elected, now go do not the political will, go do the people's will. You bloody went there. I had to read a document into council the one day where I said, you know that you're a public servant. It's actually described as that. Why are you called that? You're a servant. So we've turned politics into masters.
Yeah.
Look at the thing that happened today. 360 million rand on overtime for bodyguards of VIPs. Who are you afraid of? This is ridiculous that you spend 4 billion in the police budget on VIP protection and only 4 billion on crime intelligence in their budget. Who's prioritizing what, Mike? So I'm telling you, once the blue light rains, the black BM runs down the line and you get generators for free. That's moeilik hoor. You can't go back to being normal. And that's where the argument has laid. It's no longer about the people's will. But whatever side this country goes, be it a democratic, capitalistic kind of entity, or be it a social being, it is still South Africa. And unfortunately, it's the poster caption. It's the propaganda. You know, someone said to me one day, for you to have the master of a nationalistic entity, you must first find an enemy. Once you have the enemy, you have an objective. The DA's enemy, the Freedom Front's enemy, all those people's enemy during the election was, no doubt, rescue South Africa from whom? Take the DA and their onslaught on the Doomsday Coalition. What a great banner. And the people bought it because they see it every day, and that is the mantra. So that was put there. What is the RET faction? What's their mantra? Well, it's nationalize. It's take it back. The people must own it. But then you ask someone that is in that faction, so you're going to nationalize land and you're going to have government take back the land. And then just, Mike, where are we, hey?
Yeah.
This is La La Land.
Yeah.
And we drink it.
Yeah. But all I'm saying is that the only thing that's going to get us past this is the fever has to break.
Yes.
You have to get a critical mass
Yes.
of people that understand that this is bullshit, right? And I'm saying I'm using one thing as a important marker. We now have the country hemorrhaging professionals, but the interesting thing about the hemorrhaging of professionals is not only white professionals,
That's cool.
right? But what countries are they going to?
Yes.
So they're not going to Venezuela, but yet their parents are telling voters that they should vote South Africa into being Venezuela, while their children are going to live in Europe.
In London.
Yeah. So, it's at odds with the way the world works, and we know that. But it will eventually revert to the mean. I'm saying that people, sometimes you have to go down to the bottom of the barrel before you understand where the floor is, right?
Yeah.
And I'm saying that in South Africa, and I don't know if the DA is doing us a favor by keeping us this far from the bottom of the barrel. Let's go to the bottom. Let's see what it feels like.
Yeah.
Let everybody see what it feels like, and then perhaps we'll make some common sense decisions.
That takes balls.
Yeah.
That takes guts. They say a pilot, as I understood it, when a plane stalls, one of the things they teach you is to then push the lever forward to gain speed. And then when you get critical speed, you pull up so that you can get lift. But can you imagine in that 8 minutes, 5 minutes, that you're actually going to the ground and you're in control? To go beyond that, that takes something extra.
Yeah.
Question, where's our Churchill? Where's our leader? Where's our Mandela? Where's the person? Do you know, Mike, that in the traditional side pre-94 of the ANC, up till a point I would say just before Polokwane, there was never competition in the ANC of who would be the successor. Think about it. OR Tambo knew he was. Mandela knew he would take it from OR. Mbeki knew he would take it from Madiba. And then the bomb burst. Then we had for the first time direct people contesting the ANC presidency. I was 22 years in and out of the ANC. That was the biggest shock, is when you had a person outside the organization of tradition get up and say, nay, I'm going to stand against you. We didn't know how to handle that. We didn't know how to conceive that. Competition in ANC leadership? Never. You were elected by the branches. Now you had power play. And then came that evil thing, money. Now you could buy a presidency. It wasn't about the branches or the people anymore. That changes the face of the oldest liberation movement in this world. So where are we sitting today politically? We are sitting with a GNU. They're not yet a year. I think they are now on 157 days. As I like what you say, the fever is not broken. The fever is still ample. It's there, and they're trying to wet duck it to stay calm. But I'll tell you something. You said it, and you said it clear. The people don't realize they have the power. They have it. And for 80, 90 years when we had one party, I'm telling you, we didn't have a democracy. We had a one-party state. We had a fallible, boutique-dressed democracy. ANC governed at one stage more than 60%, if you can recall. So that's where we're saying we must never ever have that again, where we have one soluble party being a quasi-dictatorship. We are in new territory. We are in brand new territory of coalition, smaller party nagging. We are sitting where you said it, and I agree. No one got the majority. What now? They got 40, Mike. 40% the ANC, yet they govern 60% of the country's management. How did that work out?
Yeah, it's madness.
Yeah, you heard it, guys. So we'll just go straight. The Daily Maverick has a really interesting analysis on this whole issue with South Africa and BRICS and China and India. So it's really important that we understand where BRICS is at the moment and where South Africa is within the BRICS bloc, and, you know, the future of the ANC, or probably the GNU, so to speak, in the emerging BRICS category as a power bloc in our global order. So it says that President Vladimir Putin would actually be hosting the Russia's biggest gathering of world leaders since the invasion of Ukraine, and use the BRICS summit to show the US and its allies that he's no pariah. With Russian troops advancing in eastern Ukraine, it actually says that evidence is actually showing of growing war fatigue among some of the Kyiv allies, all right? And now the Kremlin is now seizing that opportunity to really cast President Putin as standing up to the West in his attempt to reshape the global order. Now, the US and the G7 partners actually dismissed that argument nonetheless, but then it's a message that resonates with some countries of the emerging world. Now, leaders of 32 countries, as well as top officials of regional organizations and United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, will actually be attending a 3-day summit starting on, Tuesday today, actually in Kazan, Kremlin. Says that the foreign policy aide Yuri Ushakov actually spoke to Daily Maverick reporters here. The report actually also argues that President Xi Jinping, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and also South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa, they're actually due to join President Putin alongside leaders of the new BRICS members, who would include Iran, Egypt, the United Arab Emirates, and Ethiopia. President Putin actually plans bilateral meetings with many of these nations, as well as with other guests such as President of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan. So President of Brazil, Luis Inácio da Silva, actually on Sunday actually cancelled his plans to attend the summit after having a head injury in an accident at his way home. But anyway, you know, Brazil is actually one of the major parts of the BRICS bloc. So it says that while BRICS favors greater use of national currencies in bilateral trade, members including India reject attempts to promote China's yuan as an alternative reserve currency. So these are kind of like the small debates now really brewing within the BRICS narrative. And for me, it's really interesting because if South Africa, you know, then becomes, not like then becomes, is a major player in the BRICS, but then South Africa is also, would then take part in the African, you know, free trade continental area. It's really tricky how this whole issue with currency, especially now regarding the fact that the AES Confederation with Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso has been formed, where they're also trying to plan to establish a currency to guide how they transact within that area of the Sahel in West Africa. The whole thing with currency is actually something tricky. But anyway, now we see that India within the BRICS doesn't want the BRICS bloc to sort of like exonerate the Chinese yuan as sort of like a rival currency, especially to the US dollar that we saw that attained hegemony during President Nixon's time, I think in 76, where the US dollar was actually taken from the gold standard and then it became fiat currency as at that time. So the Indians do not want the BRICS bloc to accentuate the Chinese yuan as a currency that would then, you know, sort of like become a basis for trade within the BRICS bloc and then attain a certain form of hegemony to also rival the dollar. So it's really interesting. I don't know what kind of currency then would then emerge as a dominant currency within the BRICS partners. But anyway, it says that Russia has also produced a summit report outlining possible changes to cross-border payments among BRICS countries aimed at circumventing the global financial system, though it acknowledges that the proposals are mainly to promote discussion. Then it also says that other BRICS states also don't have the same incentives to escape the dollar. So in other words, some of the reports from the Russian side actually say that it includes developing a network of commercial lenders to conduct transactions in local currencies, as well as establishing direct links between central banks. So probably there could be transactions between a Chinese and a South African with the rand and probably, you know, I think the Indian rupee, so to speak, and how that plays out. So there will be no need to really have your rand, you know, first of all, transferred to the US dollar or the Indian rupee transferred to the US dollar to have an exchange. So there now has to be modalities on how exchange can actually work between probably the rand and the Indian rupee and all of that. So I think it would be a really complex arrangement. But anyway, this is actually something that's actually being worked out now by the partners. It says that many other BRICS states, anyway, do not have the same incentives to escape the dollar-based system as Russia. Russia is able to escape the dollar-based system as we speak, and so that's why it's championing this whole, you know, move towards a localized, you know, use of local currency within the BRICS blocks. And so that's actually one challenge. It also says that Russia also wants to push for a de-dollarized payment system at the summit. So right now at this summit that will be beginning today, Russia also wants to, I think this might be the first experiment for a de-dollarized payment system at the summit. Probably lunch and dinners and all that would not, if there's any need to pay for something, it will be totally away from the dollar. So if President Ramaphosa has you know, a couple of rand, for example, there might have to be a system where they can actually trade directly with that rand, you know, in Russia for this summit and really test how the whole use of local currencies as a trading mechanism within the BRICS blocks would actually work out. But anyway, it says that also now for this summit anyway, Russia really wants to push for a de-dollarized system of payment with China, which China regards too ambitious. All right. So the meeting, anyway, is the first since BRICS agreed to extend membership to 6 additional nations last year at the summit in South Africa. But then Argentina actually pulled out under its new president, Javier Milei, and Saudi Arabia has remained non-committal. It says the nations ranging from Malaysia and Thailand to Nicaragua are also NATO member countries, and also Turkey is also eager to join BRICS. No. It says that nations ranging from Malaysia and Thailand to Nicaragua actually, eager to join BRICS, and also Turkey, which is also a NATO member, actually wants also to join BRICS. So in other words, it's really going to be a tricky divide on who is going to be a member and who is not going to be a member. It says India is also against the expansion. For now, is actually against further expansion. India doesn't want the BRICS to expand further, but it also wants to support a category of BRICS partner countries who would have voting rights. Now, who wouldn't have voting rights? Because it wants to steer the group away from becoming an anti-US body dominated by China and Russia. All right. So this is India's perspective. India doesn't want the BRICS bloc to be sort of like how, in the 1980s we had before the collapse of the Soviet Union, and also the Iron Curtain. We had the East versus the West, so to speak, left and right. So India doesn't want the BRICS bloc now to be a rival, a US and anti-US bloc, so to speak. So it actually wants to maintain that neutrality, as it were. It also says that Brazil and South Africa support India's view, in this regard, and also argues that any bid to dilute South Africa's influence in the BRICS blocs by inviting Nigeria and Morocco into BRICS would be resisted. So in other words, Nigeria and Morocco are African economies that actually might be a threat to South Africa's influence within the BRICS bloc if they're allowed to join BRICS. And so this is actually something that will be resisted so that South Africa can maintain a strong hegemony within the BRICS arrangement, so to speak. It says that the United Arab Emirates completely rejects any attempt to present BRICS membership as a sign that the Global South is in opposition to the West. And also the Gulf state, which is now the UAE, has a very good relationships with countries in the West, including the US. So in other words, the UAE, even if the UAE becomes a member state of BRICS, it wouldn't want to side with probably Russian or Chinese front as probably a member of a body that is anti-US, because it actually has good relationships. So sort of like maintaining the neutrality anyway, but then still building a new regional body that might rival, the US dollar and, most policies from the West. The report actually also says that the clout around BRICS is growing, all right? And its 9 members account for 26% of the world's economy and also 45% of the world's population, versus the G7, which actually has 44% of gross domestic product GDP and 10% of the world's inhabitants. So Brazil will host the G20 summit next month, following India's presidency, ahead of 2025 South Africa's presidency, I think, of the G20. So anyway, that's where it really is now with South Africa's presence within the BRICS bloc. And for me, it's really interesting because I like the fact that there's representation, at least, of a voice in Africa. And that's why many of you do not understand why my channel here is dedicated to South Africa, because I see South Africa as a major player in the future of the world as it really, evolves. But how that future would then evolve is what probably this channel is all about, because I try to document the divide. I try to document the internal divides in South Africa and how South Africa is really trying to fight together to really make its voice known as a united entity, rather than the divisions that actually make up its essence, so to speak. And so to understand South Africa's positionality within the BRICS blocks is really interesting and important, especially in light of the fact that now the BS still sees the ANC as a communist socialist kind of like system where radical economic transformation still remains at the core of its DNA, having to have that still maintain a set of like majority within the GNU, and then have the GNU represent the voice of South Africa, is a really entirely complex political order for such a linguistically and ethnically diverse nation like South Africa. But anyway, this is where we are at the moment with the GNU. We'll keep understanding and really still following up with where, you know, South Africa is actually going to be seeing itself in the likes of, with leaders like John Steenhuisen, with leaders like John Steenhuisen, for example, is actually in a hotspot because now he actually has to really tap into the markets in China and these other markets that probably might have not been, you know, allies when it was in opposition, because the DA was actually, you know, much more sided to issues with the West. But now John Steenhuisen, I'll be making another video about it on how John Steenhuisen speaks about how he admires China and he really understood China in a wrong way, and now he also has to tap into the market in China as Minister of Agriculture. We see Leon Scribe as well from Home Office also speaking about how, you know, that South Africa has to be attractive enough to be able to attract Chinese tourists, because they come in with a lot of that foreign currency that can actually boost the economy in South Africa and order. So we see a really radical change and shift in the global order, which understanding how South Africa positions itself in this whole circuit is really important to really grasp. But anyway, that's where we'll be ending for here. What do you for this video? What do you guys think about Neo de Beer's speech here? I think it was a really intellectual one for me anyway, ideological worldview, epistems and all that. But share your thoughts. What do you think about it all? Share your thoughts in the comments.